welcome to the SHIRO minicast, the best podcast for mini introductions and speed dating. Now today we have a special treat for you guys. Unfortunately, both Natalie and Peter weren't able to make it to the last minicast to introduce themselves, and luckily today we have them here to do those introductions. So, without further ado, Mr. Natalie and Peter.
Hello.
Hi there.
How's it going today, guys?
Tired.
How about you, Peter? You tired as well?
Just super happy to be here.
I'm glad to hear that. So, we got a couple questions to ask you like we asked everyone else last time. So, Kay, would you like to ask the first one?
Yeah. So, Peter, what got you interested in the Saturn?
Well, I've always been a Genesis fan during the 16-bit era, and so Saturn just seemed to be the natural progression of that. And I remember in late 95 actually renting a Saturn unit from Blockbuster, and I took it with Virtua Fighter 2 and with the original Panzer Dragoon. And seeing that opening cinema, that just blew my mind. I mean, that really showed me how much further these next generation machines were going to push gaming. And then that soundtrack just hooked me, and, you know, I just knew I had to have that system. And, you know, for full disclosure, I did ultimately also end up with a PlayStation and an N64, but all the experiences were on Saturn. That had all the stuff that as a gamer just made your heart pump.
Very nice. Natalie, how about you?
For me, I'm not going to be as specific to the year of how I got introduced to Saturn. I just remember 4 years ago when it was still the current gen console of its time. I went over to a friend's house to play, and initially it was just N64 and, you know, Genesis and all those at the time. But I remember one time I came over, and then all of a sudden there was this new console, and then I had no idea because I saw, it's disc space. There's no cartridges anymore, and he told me it was a Sega Saturn. So I wanted to try it, and the first and only game that he had was Knights. So I played it, and I just thought the graphics were unreal, and for me, that was kind of the hook right there.
Nice, yeah. I think that was my first one as well as Virtual-On. Those are some of my favorite titles on the Saturn.
Yeah.
Do you have any experience playing Virtual-On at all?
Virtual-On, no. I plan to at least pick up a copy or back up to at least give it a shot, but I hear it's good.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I think I spent time in the arcades playing that one, and when I knew it was on Saturn, I freaked out. I never knew there was released on a console. It's
Get yourself the VoIP set up, and we can play online.
Yeah, I have to do that eventually.
Yeah, you do.
That will happen though.
You did a podcast on it.
I know I did a podcast on it.
No, I'm just giving you a hard time.
You always are, dude.
No, I was talking to Natalie, though. Forget you, Pat.
Oh, thanks.
So, you guys, let's start with Peter. What are your top 3 favorite Saturn games?
Oh boy, well, that's a hard question because I think there are so many just AAA titles to choose from, but I think the easy answer for me is Nights into Dreams. I think initially when I started playing the game back in the day, it was all about, well, you know, let's just finish it as quickly as possible, let's get to the ending, and it was over pretty fast, but, you know, the more you played it, the more you realized that really it was all about going for that high score. I ultimately ended up finding some Japanese high scores that were just, you know, light years ahead of what I could pull off, and I just made it a mission to see if I can, you know, get into that level of score, and ultimately I did, and it was just unbelievably fun. And then I started noticing all the other aspects of Nights, like the A-Life and the changing music, and so, you know, to me that's just been an evergreen game, and that's definitely my number 1 Saturn game. And as for number 2 and 3, I mean, like I said, there's a list that we can have a whole podcast on that, but so many good things to choose from. The Shining series, there's Dragon Force, Power Slave, and I could go on and on. I'll just say that Knights is absolutely my number 1.
Yeah, I'm jealous of your skill, Peter. I have to say, when I come into some more time here, I'm going to be hitting you up for some tutelage on Knights, because I thought I was decent at the game, but then you kind of set the bar so high. You hold the highest score, right?
Yeah, I've got the highest score that I'm aware of. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we'll do some sort of a session where I maybe try to teach some of my tricks.
Oh, that would be great. That would be so great. What about you, Natalie? What are your top 3?
My top 3, first one has got to be Saturn Bomberman. I've always been a huge fan of the series since it came out. Well, I mean, not to say it came out, because obviously it came out actually before the Game Boy, like the MSX and all that. But it was really good on the Saturn just because of the music, and it was just so vibrant with all the colors on the screen, and it was just something that I always get really into. Afterwards, I would say probably Batsugun, just because it's a good shoot 'em up that's not necessarily like too unforgiving. It allows a little bit of like enjoyment as well, even if you're not the best player at that genre. Mm-hmm. And then probably Knights after that.
Cool. Yeah, Batsugun is cool as ice. Just like my favorite Iceman.
It's one of the better shooters.
It's a lot of fun.
But if we had to have a number 4, I would have to say the Shinrei Jusetsushi Taramaru.
Ooh, that one's good. That's the Psychic Assassin one, right?
Yeah, I could play that for hours.
Yeah, I tried playing that one. I always did awful at that. I'm more of a vertical shooter guy.
Yeah, I think Chaz tried it out a couple of nights ago, and he's not a fan either. I'm kind of sad.
Disappointment.
There's plenty of good Saturn games to go around, though. Just means more games for everyone else, right?
We all seem to have Knights in common, though. Well, that's cool. At least
everybody.
Somebody was posting on the Junkyard, like, is Knights overrated? I certainly don't think so. I mean, I think it's like one of those games that overrated or overhyped, and Knights do not go in the same sentence.
I think it's just a solid, fun game.
But more than anything, it's just revolutionary, you know? It's just so different. It's really hard to say that it's overhyped.
Yeah, I wouldn't say overhyped or underrated, but I think it's like perfect in the middle.
I'm just more impressed with the graphic power of the time of what it was capable of doing for a game like that.
Knights is kind of like the embodiment of this idea that here's gaming as you know it, and now here's this new console, and we're going to pretty much just scrap everything you knew and go in a completely different direction with pretty much most of our game lineup, you know, like Panzer Dragoon Saga. And, you know, most of the stuff you get on the Saturn, just go like, and now for something completely different, you know? It was like, not really like the Mega Drive at all.
Sega Saturn's Flying Circus.
Basically. For better or worse.
Stood at the time, too. I think, you know, folks at the time were trying to compare it to the other big titles like Crash and Mario, and you just couldn't compare it. It was so completely different.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, Crash is much easier to compare to Mario because it tries to exist in that same space of, you know, just linear progression and you know, jumping on boxes and picking stuff up. But I mean, Knights it's just off the wall. It's just different. I don't know that I've ever played a game like it. But should we move on?
Yeah, sure. So, my question for you guys is, what would you say is your favorite Sega Saturn memory?
All right, I'll start. I think there's a lot for me. A couple that stand out. First of all, being a Saturn gamer back in the day, back when the console was current, I felt was actually, you know, a very lonely experience. There was no internet back then, or at least not as widespread as it is now. So connecting with other Saturn gamers, you know, unless, you know, you knew them locally, it didn't really happen. And virtually everybody else played either N64 or PlayStation. So, you know, you'd go through certain games that were exclusive to Saturn and you'd think that they were just amazing, or you'd discover some neat trick or secret, or, you know, you had some sort of experience, and there's no way to share that with anybody because nobody had any idea what you were talking about. So initially for me, it was, you know, it was very lonely. Another really cool memory for me was Nights into Dreams finally breaking 1 million points in a single level. I had seen some scores out of Japan where the odd individual had done it, but then having to be able to do it myself was pretty special. Depending on the screen you're in with Knights, that score counter stops at 6 digits. So when you hit into the million, plus score and it's in that 7th digit, it doesn't quite roll over. So, it's sort of neat to see that, wow, I think I just pushed this game further than the programmers, figured that the average gamer would. And so that was a really neat memory for me.
Cool.
Do you still have that save?
No, I lost the save, but I'm working on getting those scores right back up there.
Nice. What about you, Natalie? What would you say your favorite Sega Saturn memory is?
I kind of have to go in with two different ones. First being picking up the controller for the first time, seeing the intro go through the BIOS splash, and it was just something new for me. And it felt so exciting because it was like one of the first CD-based consoles that I had, come across. And then if I have to add in a second one, but if there was to be a second, it would be just finally getting the chance, at least now, to modify the console. And for me, that's just as exciting because I get to make it everything I ever wanted it to be.
Cool. What kind of mods have you done to your Saturn, if you don't mind me asking?
Right now it has a region-free BIOS 1.01 on my Japanese Saturn, and I also did the FRAM mod, so no backup saves will ever get deleted once the battery actually dies. And I also have a Phantom IC chip, so backups are possible.
Oh, nice. That sounds like one hell of a Saturn.
So, Natalie, how does that FRAM mod work? I mean, is that like that memory is almost like an SD card or something? How does that work?
It's basically a direct replacement onboard chip. It's the same exact pinout for the most part, except one of the legs on the chip has to be lifted and grounded. And then the saves are in capacity are still limited to the BIOS. You can't get around it, you can't increase it at the moment. So it stays as what it was, and the only difference is that it's non-volatile memory, so it has no reason to let that save go. Yeah, basically there's no like a battery update to that thing, so basically it's not asking for it anymore.
Cool.
Nice. Did you have to desolder that whole the circuit in there though?
Yeah, you have to desolder the original RAM chip, and then put the new one on. Same goes for the BIOS. And
nice. Hopefully you had a solder sucker with that. You didn't have to get like little what was that called, the wick, and put it on there and take them all off.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the way I did it was I kind of do it a little bit. I mean, for me it's easier, and some people are against the way
you cut the legs.
I snip the legs with a very, very strong and fine cutters, and I snip them at the very top of the chip, remove the chip, and then I basically push the legs that are left off, and then I wick the entire all the pads down, and then lay new solder and just set it in.
Sure.
So
yeah, that's legit. I mean, I've seen people like Voltaire do that before, and
yeah, if you don't have a heat gun,
I have strong opinions against Voltaire.
Why? What are you hating against Voltaire?
I feel like he's kind of messy and just a big shit talker.
Sounds about right.
Because I'm very particular, and I take a lot of pride in my work and in terms of modifying and repairing. And
you don't like to talk bad about douchey dance?
Well, Deutschen Dance sucks too.
That works.
I've seen all the horrible videos and people telling about the hot glue mess. It's like, that's just not how you do it professionally. If you want people to respect your work, you've got to do it where it looks like it's factory.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a solder replacement. It's not even close to that. Like, even when people use it just to hold stuff down, I'm still like, you'd probably just make the lines a lot shorter.
Because I plan to contribute to the website to show tutorials on how to do it, and what I'm going to show is what, in my opinion, the best way to go about modifying your Sega Saturn, where it looks good, works good, and it doesn't look like you just have a spaghetti mess, or it doesn't look like it's cheaply done or rushed. It looks like it's factory. That's the way I feel like it should always be.
That's a really great way to look at it, and I 100% agree with you.
So Natalie, are you an engineer technician or do that for a living?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay. I was just curious. Cool. So, Claire, do you want to take the next question?
Yeah, so in the past few days, I don't know if you guys have been around the Facebook groups at all, but there's been some discussion about which displays we all use for retro gaming. So I'm curious, what kind of display do you use, and which aspect ratio do you play in, 4:3 or 16:9? Peter?
Oh, it's got to be 4:3 all the way, all the time. Yes, that means you've got borders on either side of your screen, but you're playing the game the way that the programmers originally intended it. In terms of what kind of display I use, so I've actually got a couple of mid-2000s plasma TVs that I use that luckily natively accept a 240p signal. And so I actually have an RGB transcoder. So I've got SCART cables for my Saturns, and then I output it over component onto my plasma display, and it looks phenomenal. It looks really, really sharp. And I mean, I know that for a lot more effort and certainly money, I could probably go for something a little bit better. Whether I should sort of start wandering down that rabbit hole. But I'm really quite happy with the current setup that I have. The colors come through really nicely on the plasma, and it's extremely sharp. And I know some folks prefer to have, the sort of the scan lines first of all, or else the slightly blurry image. But I'm all about seeing every pixel as sharp as possible. And the current display that I have, really does a good job.
And you didn't notice any input lag on that setup?
Lag whatsoever. I mean, you're essentially transcoding your image signal, and then it goes right into your TV, and there's no processing lag apparent anyways, not in the TV and not in the transcoder either. So it's a very clean, quick, easy setup, and I've got no issues whatsoever. I'd recommend it for anybody looking for a cheap setup.
What kind of transcoder was that? Was that the Shiny Bow one?
I don't actually see a brand name on the box itself. I bought it on eBay it was something like $60 way back in the day, but I actually still see them on even now. But no, it's not. It's quite generic. I don't think it actually has any branding on it whatsoever.
It's probably like Sang or something like that. It's probably like one of those unbranded black Chinese boxes. Yeah, but I mean, it does a pretty simple job. I mean, it's just going, YPPBR to RGB color space. What kind of TV did you say you had? I missed that.
Panasonic plasma TV from the mid-2000s.
Okay.
Those.
Wow, Peter, you are describing my exact setup right now. I'm also on a Panasonic plasma from the mid-2000s. So
720p or 1080p?
720p is as high as it'll go.
Okay. So that actually probably looks pretty nice then.
Well, it looks really, really great. Like, the screenshots that I've taken for my articles so far have literally just been camera close to the TV, and they've come off really nice, and I don't process those images like through Photoshop or anything like that. So what you're seeing is what I'm seeing as I play, so it's a really, really nice picture. Cool. And then, TVs from that time period have the new inputs, like you've got your HDMI inputs and what have you, but you've got all of your sort of more traditional inputs like S-video and component and everything like that, and everything sort of goes in. You don't have any, incompatible signals that I've come across anyways, so mid-2000s plasmas are really valuable to me.
Nice.
Cool.
So, Natalie, what kind of display do you use for your Saturn gaming?
I wish I could say that I was on the same boat with the CRTs or with like everybody else, but my last CRT that I had and the many others, well, the last one literally blew up when I was using it, and it was nothing too extravagant. It was just a Magnavox, nothing like a PVM or anything, which I would really like. But right now, all I have is an LG HD TV 1080p. It still has, the component and composite abilities. So right now I'm having to use composite with my Saturn, and I really would like a SCART to component setup, but right now money is not my favor, so I'm kind of having to hold off.
You had a really fun road ahead of you if you really want to get into all that stuff.
For sure. And which aspect ratio do you play in? Do you play in the stretched 16:9 or the 4:3?
It honestly depends on my mood, and since most of my mood is tired, I'm tending to leave it on 16:9 without even thinking, because I'm just like, I want to play this game and it doesn't look too far off for me. But then once I switch to 4:3, when I realize it, I'm just like, oh no, this looks much better. But what I'm doing is probably just going to leave it in, I'm assuming 16:9 for now when it's on this TV, and then when I get another CRT, or maybe if I can come across a PVM, it'll be stuck in 4:3 all the time.
I gotcha. Is there any PVMs you want to look for specifically, or is it just anything that comes along?
I mean, considering that they're not very common, at least around where I'm at, I would probably just go with whatever I can. But I've seen a couple of these like Sony PVMs, at least when I've been watching some of the Game Tech US videos on YouTube, and I really like his, but I know they're kind of pricey sometimes.
Yeah, my friend is actually selling his in Arizona. He wants like $300 for the, I think it's a 20 M2U or something.
Hasn't he been selling that thing for like months now?
How do you even know that's him?
Because you've told this story before, Pat.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm like, he's still
more
selling
sick
it?
than I thought. Yeah, he's still trying to sell it. $325. If anyone's interested, he's in the CRT collective.
Honestly, Natalie, get on Craigslist and grab yourself a mid-2000s consumer Sony Trinitron with component inputs, and you'll be happy.
I feel like Craigslist is so shady. I have to go to like OfferUp and eBay.
Okay, I guess it depends on where you're at. I mean, in San Diego, I've had luck with it, but yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on where you're at. But basically, you know, you get yourself a between 20 to 27 inch. I mean, you can go bigger if you want, but they're just really heavy. But you get a consumer Sony Trinitron or even like an XBR with component inputs, and it'll look amazing. I mean, yeah, there's a difference between that and a PVM, and then even more so with a BVM, but I mean, you're going to pay through the nose and you're not going to see that much of a difference.
Yeah.
And honestly, the BVM isn't going to look like what you remember as a kid. The consumer Trinitron will actually look like a really nice version of what you remember as a kid, you know?
And let's face it, nobody wants to pay $1,000 for a CRT. Let's be real here.
I mean, I love the look of Phosphor. Definitely has its own look. But yeah, I wouldn't pay that much for like a 20-inch BVM.
As much as it sucked to have my CRT blow up when I was using it, it was quite a scene.
Sure. You mean the blowing up?
No, not like pieces of metal and shit everywhere. No, but it's like when it failed, it just had this like pop that was like having a pipe bomb. It was extremely loud, and it just filled the room with smoke, and it was just blowing black everywhere, and it was just horrible.
It was like a Michael Bay film, and you like had to like jump out of the way. No, that's crazy though. I've actually never heard of a CRT blowing up on somebody during use. So, but that sounds like the flyback or something went bad.
I just didn't even care to open it, and I was like, yeah, this is not worth my time.
You're better off not opening it. Yeah.
Straight in the trash.
So here's a funny question, you guys. This was one question that we asked the last group, and I don't know why they put this on the list of questions, but which of Pat's SHIRO intros do you like the best?
None.
There you go.
You know, so I've listened to all the casts, and there were a couple that really stood out for me. The Christmas one where, you know, we're the only cast that something like scares your children at Christmas, and even this most recent one, the only cast to offer a rolling start and how it cut away to the Daytona music. Like, I mean, that's pure cheese, but I love it. It's just awesome.
Yeah, that was Pat's inspiration.
Thank you. Dave put that together. I make that up and send it to him, but I completely forgot.
But that was your idea, right, Pat?
Yeah,
that's what you told me
you picked up my slack, though. I appreciate that.
That's okay.
So, guys, one more silly question to kind of round out our mini interviews today. And I'll ask Peter first. What is your most embarrassing gaming moment?
Oh boy. Okay, so I do have a few. I'll mention them real quick. I'd mentioned earlier about how I use a transcoder for my picture display. Well, that thing needs its own power supply, and I had to go and buy a power adapter separately. Well, I was in such a rush to get this going and to get that better picture on my TV screen that I didn't really pay attention to the wattage. And I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous, but I plugged that sucker in and I turned on, literally fried that transcoder. Like, we're talking smoke and sparks and everything. So that was pretty embarrassing. Not too long after, I actually ended up picking up a white Japanese SEGA Saturn, and once again, I didn't really pay attention to the voltage. This time, though, I was fortunate and I didn't fry anything because I guess between us and Japan, there isn't too much of a difference. So I was okay there. The last one that I'll mention real quick is, back in the day, I really wanted to get my hands on a copy of Christmas Nights, and there was a fool at work who, wanted to make a quick buck off of me and essentially sold me on this idea that he's got a copy for me. If I just pay him up front, he'll get it for me. And he ended up being, he just wanted the money to buy his next hit of drugs or whatever it was, and he ended up quitting. And I should have known. It was just such a naive move of me to just hand over the money because I just wanted that game so badly. And in retrospect, that's pretty embarrassing. That he obviously needed his drugs more than I needed Christmas Nights, or that he needed his job. So. Oh,
we read that. We read that on the Christmas cast. Or now I'm remembering that story.
Oh yeah, I think I actually read that too. That's crazy though, Peter. I'm sorry about that. I think we should get you a copy of Christmas Nights.
Oh, he got it finally.
Oh, that's good. I'm happy to hear.
Yeah, no, I did end up, I wanted that game super badly, so I did end up,
right? He ended up getting it for you?
Exactly. So, I did get it in the end, so the story does have a happy ending. It's just, sometimes you want a game so bad that you're blind to some very obvious hints and clues in front of you that a deal probably isn't going to work out, and that was my story. That was me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it's happened to the best of us. I know I can sure say that I've had a deal or two with Saturn that hasn't quite worked out the way that I had hoped. So I'm just glad that you got it in the end, Peter. So, Natalie, I'll throw it over to you. What is your most embarrassing gaming moment?
I can't really think of one that's necessarily a gaming moment, but something in relation to gaming. So because I do modding and repair work for my consoles or other people's, and it's not even Saturn, but somebody had given me a Neo Geo AES console to install a new BIOS into, and I was kind of in a rush because I was on my way to work, and I decided just to do it real quick, and I kind of just went too fast. I wasn't taking my time, and I had screwed it up a little bit. So when I had tested it and the person was already expecting the console within an hour's time from when I was doing it, it did not show any kind of graphical, normal picture at all. It was garbled and it just looked horrible, and it was bad to me, and that was embarrassing because I have a good track record so far, and I was, promising this person that it's going to look great, it's going to, be everything they wanted, and it's going to be done soon. But I kind of just said too soon, and I shouldn't have placed such a harsh timeline on myself.
How did that end up working out?
I ended up telling the person that just give me another day and I'll have it fixed. And I just ended up going across the board of several times, just checking with continuity over everything. And there's hundreds of points. It took me a couple hours, and I found there was just a few points that were just really kind of sketchy already to start with. But because they didn't give me a cartridge to test the console prior, I didn't even know if they were telling me the truth. Regardless, though, I repaired several traces that were kind of sketchy. And then one trace leading from the VRAM to the BIOS was just shot already. So, to be honest, I don't remember because I didn't quite get a good look at it before I started.
I gotcha. You were able to get to work, though, eventually, right?
Oh, yeah. It was just 2 hours after I said I was going to start looking at it. It was up and running.
Nice. Congrats. Yeah, I don't know if you heard about it, but on a previous cast, I actually got, a couple months ago, a MVS board and got that consoleized. But luckily, all the slots were very socketed, so all I had to do was remove the chip and put the Unibios in there.
Yeah, and while the Unibios is actually supposed to be socketed, the customer had given me the BIOS without a socket, and now that's possible. You could still put it in there, but it's just not the right way to do it. But that's what they wanted me to do.
Nice. We might have to talk Neo Geo stuff later.
You guys with your cartridge Neo Geo games.
Sorry.
CD only, baby. No.
Nobody's got time for that, Dave.
Just
Nobody's
kidding.
got time with
I don't have time to wait
Hey,
for
man. We have time for it. Season 1, Episode 2, Neo Geo on Sega Saturn.
That's Saturn load times, not Neo Geo CD load time.
SNK Neo Geo SHIRO.
Yeah.
Let's
I
go.
keep
I'm gonna
trying
go
trying to defend the CDZ, but they don't believe me.
Well, hey, don't hate on the CDC. I have a top loader Neo Geo CD, and that thing is great. So I know the load times, but whatever.
Yeah.
So this was a getting to know you episode for 2 more of your newest Shiros. Peter, who is heading our editorial and article writing, and Natalie, who will be doing in-depth videos and articles about modifying your consoles and getting the most out of your systems. And we want to
She's our mad scientist.
Definitely. So we definitely wanted to thank them for joining us today, and thank you guys for listening.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a good night and good fight.
And always remember, you must play Sega Saturn.